For one golden decade, the finest sound in the American living room carried a single name, Marantz. From one box that did it all in 1968 to a 300-watt monster that flattened almost everything else on Earth, this is the complete story of its golden age, and how it burned out almost as fast as it caught fire. Every model in order, from the Model 18 to the 2600. By the mid-70s, Marantz was locked in an all-out war, where the number stamped on the front panel could save the whole company or sink it, because everyone remembers Marantz as the untouchable king of hi-fi. The truth is, the one machine that made its name almost wiped it off the map. To understand the first Marantz receiver, you have to understand a man who feared just one thing: sound that wasn't perfect. In the early 50s, in the basement of a house in Kew Gardens, New York, Saul Marantz wasn't trying to build a company. He was a music lover who couldn't stand how his records sounded on the gear he could buy, so he built his own. What came out of that basement became legend: the Model 7 preamp, the Model 9 amplifiers, and in 1963, an FM tuner, the 10B. So precise that engineers still argue it was the finest ever made. But the 10B had a fatal flaw. It was so advanced and priced so low that Marantz lost money on nearly every one. The better the reviews got, the deeper the hole got. By 1964, the man behind the most respected name in American audio could barely make payroll, so he sold. Superscope bought Marantz for $3 million and went hunting for a bigger market. The plan was simple: cheaper Marantz gear, built in Japan, sold to far more people than a boutique brand ever could. In December 1967, Saul walked away from the company that carried his name for good. Superscope wanted something Saul had never built: one box that did it all: tuner, preamp, and power amp on a single chassis, without losing the Marantz sound. That box was the Model 18. Released in 1968, it was the first Marantz receiver, and Saul's last design. It was almost entirely solid state, transistors where there used to be tubes, almost. Because glowing in the front panel was a tiny screen, a real oscilloscope, the one tube left in the machine, there to help you lock onto a station with your own eyes. Below it, the gyro-touch flywheel, so smooth that people spun it just to feel it. 40 watts per channel, distortion at 0.2%, $695. About 7,000 people paid it before 1969. The Model 18 proved Marantz could survive the jump to transistors. But it was a statement, not a hit. The receiver that would truly put Marantz on the map, the one with the blue dial, the one that would crawl out of a fire still playing, was 3 years away. Let's start with the fire. A house burns to the ground. In the rubble, the owner finds a receiver. Face charred, wood consumed, metal warped. It should be dead. He swaps the power cord, plugs it in, and it plays. Not only plays, it still meets factory spec. Marantz saw that story and knew what it had. In 1976, it turned it into one of the most famous ads in audio. That scorched receiver and a message with no frills: our machines don't break. Not even on fire. The receiver in the photo was the Model 2270. And to understand why Marantz bet its reputation on it, you have to remember where the company stood. The Model 18 had survived the transistor jump, but it wasn't a hit. Superscope didn't need another museum piece. It needed a winner. That was the 2270, launched in late 1971, at the top of the line. And the first thing it did wasn't play. It was glow. Switch it on, and the dial lit up with a blue glow no competitor had. On a wall of nearly identical silver receivers, the Marantz was the only one that seemed to breathe. That blue glow is still today the brand's signature. Underneath was real muscle, 70 watts per channel, distortion at 0.3%. But what made people fall in love wasn't the numbers. It was the sound. People who grew up with a Marantz describe it the same way every time: warm. A richness in the voices that made you want to sit down and stay. And the gyro touch, inherited from the Model 18, so smooth that turning it became a small ritual. All of this was still designed and built in Vista, California, though production was already looking toward Japan. It cost between $500 and $550. Not cheap. And still, Marantz built about 84,000 units for a high-end piece, a number from another planet. Plenty of them are still out there today, still glowing. The 2270 put Marantz on the map, so iconic that when the fire ad ran, some rivals joked, half serious, that maybe it was the 2270 that started the fire. When the competition jokes that your product is too much, you've won. But 70 watts, in 1971, was a fortune in power. Marantz had just shown the world a big number on a front panel, and soon, every brand would want to stamp on a bigger one. The Watt War was about to begin. But before going to war, Marantz did something smarter than building the most powerful receiver. It built the one the most people could take home. Because the 2270 had a problem. It cost more than $500. It was the flagship, and most people admired it from across the street. Superscope knew it. After the Model 18, it had refined the formula in the Model 19, basically the 18 redesigned. And from there, it built a whole family, the 2200 series, a staircase with a step for every budget. And right in the sweet spot of that staircase, the 2230, launched in 1972 at about $350. It gave 30 watts per channel, half the flagship's power. But that number doesn't tell the whole story. 30 Marantz watts filled a bedroom, a first apartment, an ordinary living room with music. You didn't buy it for the figure. You bought it for what the figure did. And what it did was sound warm. It's the word almost everyone who's owned one repeats. Warm and intimate. A softness that invited you to dim the lights and stay. That warmth, they say, only Marantz ever pulled off. On the outside, it shared its big brother's DNA. The same silver face, the same blue glow, the same gyro touch. From the couch, in low light, it was hard to tell a 2230 from a 2270. You got the look and the Marantz sound for half the price. And people answered. Marantz built about 185,000 units of the 2230, more than double the flagship. That's the number that matters. The 2270 put Marantz on the map. The 2230 put it in people's hands. But while the 2230 filled quiet living rooms, something else was starting on the showroom floor. Brand after brand looked at the neighbor's number and asked the same thing. What if ours were bigger? 30 watts was about to look like child's play. I promised you the next Marantz would raise the stakes. And it did. But not the way you expected. While the industry chased the biggest number, Marantz already had a quieter play in its own lineup. Not for the person who wanted to show off, for the one who'd done the homework. That was the 2245. On paper, a middle step, 45 watts per channel, between the 2230's 30 and the flagship's 70. Launched in 1971 for $449, it looked like just another mid-range model. But open the lid. Inside, the 2245 shared almost the same output stage as the 2270, and nearly the same preamp topology. The real differences came down to the power rails and the drive power. Put another way, much of what made the flagship sing was in here too, in a box that cost $50 or $60 less. And on the outside, the illusion was complete. The same silver face, the same blue glow, the same gyro touch. From the armchair, no one would know you weren't listening to the most expensive model in the house. That was the 2245's loving trick, almost the whole high-end Marantz for a good deal less. And people figured it out. Marantz built about 82,700 units, nearly as many as the 2270 itself. Almost as many little brothers sold as flagships. The silent proof that plenty of buyers did the math and picked the one that knew. The 2245 was maybe the smartest receiver you could buy in 1971. But smart doesn't win wars. And out there, the Watt War was no longer about value or good sense. It was about excess. Until now, the flagship 70 had been the top of the house. With the next receiver, that figure would fall. And once it started climbing, no one knew where the ceiling was. For 3 years, the number that ruled the house of Marantz was the flagship 70. In 1974, Marantz itself broke it. The receiver that did it was the 2275. From a distance, it looked like another family member. Same silver face, same blue dial, same gyro touch. But inside, it marked the end of an era. Literally. The 2275 was no longer built in California. It was designed in the United States and made in Japan. The border the company had been crossing for years was now fully behind it. 75 watts per channel, only 5 more than the 1971 flagship. But the message wasn't in the size of the jump. It was in the direction. For the first time, the biggest number in the house wasn't the old king. Marantz was admitting, with its own catalog, that 70 was no longer enough. And it came armed. A phase-locked loop FM demodulator, a 5-gang tuner, direct-coupled output stages. Technical names for a simple idea. Squeeze every last drop out of a signal and deliver it clean. But its secret weapon wasn't power. It was a feature no other model in the classic series had. Dolby FM. Today it sounds like a footnote, but in 1974 it was a promise. Radio carried a constant background hiss, that whisper between the notes. Dolby FM went after it head-on stations set up for it, to bring radio closer to the purity of a record. In a nearly identical family, the 2275 was the only one with that card up its sleeve. All of this for about $600 in 1974. Marantz built about 51,000 units, quite a few fewer than the 2270 or the 2245. And that drop says something. The 2275 was pricier and more specialized, not the receiver for the masses, but a sign of where the company was heading, away from the many, toward the few, because the 2275 is the hinge of this story. Behind it are the classic blue-face receivers, warm and sensible. Ahead of it, a race opens up. 75 watts had just broken the ceiling, but the next Marantz wouldn't raise it by 5 watts. It would raise it by 50, all at once, 50 watts at once. But for the first time, to understand why, you have to step out of the Marantz factory and look at the whole showroom. In 1974, something changed everything. Pioneer launched the SX1010, the world's first receiver with 100 continuous watts per channel. Around 100, a number so big and clean it worked like a headline. And it officially lit the fuse on what we now call the receiver wars. From there, the front panel figure stopped being a spec. It was a standoff. Kenwood answered almost immediately with the KR9400 and 120 watts. You no longer matched the neighbor's number. You beat it. And in the middle of that standoff, Marantz laid its card on the table. The Model 2325, 125 watts per channel. 5 more than Kenwood, 25 more than Pioneer. Just enough to sit, for the moment, at the very top. The 2325 became the new flagship and retired the 70-watt 2270 that, 3 years earlier, had looked so commanding. That's how fast the war moved. But the 2325 wasn't an inflated number. Plenty of rivals chased the big figure and skimped on what was behind it. Marantz didn't. Inside were independent power supplies for each channel, direct coupled stages, A circuitry that could deliver serious current. When you asked for the real 125 watts, they were there, clean. That's why they call it the rock receiver, the machine that grabbed any speaker, however demanding, and controlled it without breaking a sweat. It's still one of the most sought-after Marantz units today. It cost nearly $800, and this time the price matters in reverse. Marantz built only about 41,000 units, half as many as the 2270. That wasn't a failure, it was proof of what the thing had become. You were no longer selling the receiver that fit any living room. You were selling power the way you sell a sports car. Expensive, excessive, for whoever could pay. And even so, it still switched on with the same blue glow as always. That was the trick, joining the watt war without ever stopping sounding like a Marantz. 125 watts looked like the ceiling. It wasn't. Because once a whole industry decides bigger is always better, no one dares to stop first. And the next receivers wouldn't compete to sound better. They'd compete to be, quite simply, the most brutal ever built. 185 watts per channel, 60 more than the previous flagship. With the Model 2385, in 1977, Marantz stepped fully into the monster era. But the real story of the 2385 isn't in that number. It's in whether that number was true. To understand that, you have to go back to 1974, the year the United States government stepped into the watt war. Until then, stating a machine's power had been almost the Wild West. Every maker measured however it suited them, and brochures bloomed with figures that evaporated in your living room. So the Federal Trade Commission stepped in. From 1974 on, real continuous power had to be stated first. And in large type, both channels driven at once. 20 to 20,000 hertz, with its distortion measured. But the feared part was something else. Before measuring, you had to precondition the unit for a full hour at 1/3 of its power, which is exactly where an amplifier like this runs hottest. An hour sweating before the real test even began. Suddenly, the front panel number had to hold up for an hour, burning, both channels maxed out. Some makers had to lower the figures on units they were already selling, just to pass the exam. The rule had teeth, and it was aimed straight at the inflated numbers. That was the bar the 2385 had to clear, and it was built for it. A huge toroidal power supply, distortion held under 1/7 of 1%, and 185 watts that were the real thing. Continuous, sustained, measured the way the rule demanded, not a brochure figure, a figure that held up under questioning. All of that was heavy, nearly 60 pounds of transformer, heat sinks, and metal. No longer a shelf unit, it was furniture. You didn't set it on a shelf, you built the shelf around it. And it cost like it. Nearly $1,100, more than double the flagship of 3 years earlier. Marantz built only about 5,300 units. Set that against the more than 40,000 of the 2325. In 3 years, the top Marantz had gone from filling homes to a rarity for the few. Because here was the trap of this whole war. The biggest number in the brochure and the biggest number for real weren't always the same thing. And who delivered what they promised when the test bore down was about to become the great question of the last monsters. The 2385 was Marantz's answer, said under its breath. It still had one to say at full voice. 250 watts per channel. In 1977, the Model 2500 pushed Marantz almost to the ceiling of what a single home unit could give. But what really matters about the 2500 isn't its power. It's what Marantz decided to put on its face, an oscilloscope. Go back to the beginning of this story, to the brand's first receiver, that Model 18 of 1968, with a tiny screen glowing in the front panel, the one tube in a transistor machine, inherited from the legendary 10B. Almost 10 years later, at the height of the Watt War, on a 250-watt beast weighing nearly 60 pounds, Marantz put an oscilloscope back on the front panel. A small blue tube, pulsing with the signal. The circle closed. The company that began obsessed with seeing sound, not just hearing it, ended its golden age with that same obsession, glowing on the face of its next-to-last monster. And it was a rare monster. Marantz built barely about 1,500 units of the 2500. No longer a product, almost a statement. A machine built to be admired as much as heard. But it still wasn't the last word. That came in 1978. The Model 2600. 300 watts per channel. The most powerful receiver Marantz would ever build. And here it pays to be exact, because this audience knows the 2600 was not the most powerful in the world. On paper, the Technics SA1000 came in ahead at 330 watts, and the 2600 tied for second place on the planet with the Sansui G33000. Marantz didn't win the war by having the biggest number. It won, according to many who still collect them, on something else, on delivering what the label actually said. Remember the test. An hour of preconditioning, the unit burning, both channels maxed. That exam separated the machines that held their figure from the ones that only wore it in the brochure. And among collectors, the 2600 earned a reputation as honest muscle. 300 watts that were there when you went looking for them, with distortion of just 0.03%. Not the highest number in the room, but, for many, the most real. Physically, a beast. Nearly 60 pounds. The same blue dial. The same gyro touch from 1968. The same oscilloscope on its face. Everything Marantz had learned in 25 years, in one impossible box. Designed in the United States and built in Japan like every monster before it. And of it, Marantz made about 1,000 units. Just 1,000 in the whole world. Set that against the 185,000 of the humble 2230 we started this staircase with. The 2600 wasn't built to sell. It was built to crown. That's why today, when a real one turns up in good shape, it doesn't cost what it cost. It costs thousands of dollars. The best ones, 5 figures. People don't pay that for 300 watts. Any cheap amplifier gives you those now. They pay for what that box represents. The moment a whole company put everything it knew on the table, without a thought for the price or the masses, just to build the best machine it was capable of building. Exactly like Saul Marantz in a basement 25 years earlier, with the tuner that almost ruined him. The 2600 was the summit. 300 watts, 1,000 units, a blue oscilloscope glowing in the dark. And then, almost overnight, that whole world went dark. It wasn't killed by a bigger receiver. It was killed by something much smaller. Silver, the size of the palm of your hand. That silver thing was the compact disc. In 1982, Marantz launched one of the world's first CD players, the CD63. 2 years earlier, the company had changed hands again. Philips had taken the Marantz name for almost the entire planet. And just like that, perfect sound no longer came from a 60-pound box with a blue dial and 300 watts burning inside. It came, cold and clean, from a laser reading a disc the size of your palm. The reign of the great analog receiver was over. But turn that blue dial all the way off, and you're still missing half the living room. Because not one Marantz ever played alone. Every watt we've counted existed to push something on the other side of the room. The speakers. That was the other half of the war. The half that actually reached your ears. And for decades, that half was ruled by a single American name, with its own giants and its own legends. That's the story you still have to hear. Every JBL speaker. The complete history. It's right here.